You do not want to get caught up with me. People love a monster. There is gonna be a mob. Really? I've been through this before. It is terrible. Go. Go. Get out of here. Go home.
I don't know where I live.
You ever watch a film that feels like it's trying to break open your bones to see what's inside? That's the moment the bride begins to work on you. The screen crackles with electricity, not just as a visual motif, but as a promise. This is not the Frankenstein story you think you know. When that body rises up in a laboratory, hair wild and eyes alive with recognition, you realize immediately that this narrative isn't interested in old cliches. It's interested in collision, between myth and meaning, between creation and consent, between horror and love. This is Film Thought. I'm Medius. I don't summarize stories, I dismantle them using what's actually on screen. The Bride premiered in March 2026. It was written and directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it stars Christian Bale as a version of Frankenstein's creature, here called Frank, and Jessie Buckley as his bride. The project emerged in an era when creators were re-engaging with classic texts to interrogate them, rather than simply recreate them. For decades, Frankenstein has been retold, remixed, and reinterpreted, but Gyllenhaal's film takes a deliberate stance. It wants to ask uncomfortable questions about power, agency, and narrative ownership. During press, Gyllenhaal explained that the film couldn't simply echo older adaptations. She said that if she was going to tell another take on this story, she had to confront something that had rarely been addressed explicitly in earlier versions: agency, and specifically consent. That idea, that the act of creating another being brings with it moral questions about autonomy, is one of the film's core tensions. From the opening sequence, the film sets up its fractured relationship with tradition. Mary Shelley is invoked not as a distant author of a novel from 1818, but almost as a harbinger. Her ghostly narration suggests she had another story she never finished writing, one that takes place after the original monster's birth. This device immediately signals that the bride is in conversation with its past, not trapped within it. The film's narrative turns on a single decision. Frank, the creature, recruits Dr. Euphronius to create a companion for him. What's unusual here is not the act of creation, that's classic Frankenstein, but the choice of subject. The body they reanimate belongs to a woman named Ida, a murder victim with no memory of her own life. This is not resurrection as restoration. This is resurrection as blank slate. The motive is not explained through science, but through desire. Frank wants connection, but the method he uses, wiping away Ida's past and then telling her who she was and who she is now, is where the film's deeper conflicts emerge. In early scenes after her reanimation, Frank tells Ida a carefully constructed story about their past together, that they were married, that an accident erased her memory. On screen, Buckley's performance sells the narrative moment. Ida accepts these claims with a blend of confusion and trust. But even in those early exchanges, you can see the cracks. The camera lingers on her eyes when Frank speaks, and there's always a flicker of doubt. That visual language matters because it's not just about what is said, it's about what's registered in her expression. The film repeatedly returns to that flicker to show that narrative can be imposed, but internal experience cannot be fully erased. Once they leave the confines of the laboratory, the bride and Frank become fugitives. They are pursued by detectives who are at once comic, tragic, and relentless. Their journey through the landscape is one of increasing complication. They are wanted, feared, and mythologized by the public. Here, the film plays with genre, shifting from gothic horror to road movie to outlaw romance. But these shifts are never tonally arbitrary. They reflect the instability at the heart of the central relationship, Ida's struggle to define herself outside of Frank's narrative. Christian Bale's Frank is a creature driven by longing. He wants companionship with a sincerity that is both palpable and unsettling. He delights in simple pleasures, music, dancing, shared laughter, but those moments are always tinged with anxiety. When something threatens the illusion he has built, Bale's performance registers panic, not strategy. It is in these moments that the film reveals Frank's psychology. His desire for connection is genuine, but his methods for ensuring connection are rooted in possession. Ida's psychology is equally important. She begins as an enigma because she lacks memory. But this lack is not used as a plot convenience. It becomes the space where the film interrogates what identity really means. Because she doesn't remember her past, she is confronted with others' stories about her, particularly Frank's. What does it mean to inhabit a narrative someone else has scripted for you? As the story progresses, we see Ida begin to question inconsistencies in Frank's account, to notice contradictions, to ask her own questions. That shift, from acceptance to scrutiny, is the film's emotional core. These psychological dynamics are not abstract. They play out in concrete visual choices. Lighting and set design emphasize contrast and instability. The recurring image of lightning, a classic Frankenstein motif, does more than signal creation. In The Bride, lightning punctuates moments where narrative and identity collide. It jolts, reveals, fractures. In the final moments, when Ida attempts to resurrect Frank after he is shot, the lightning does not simply bring life back. Instead, it frames their intertwined hands in a single flash of brilliance before the screen cuts to black. It's not closure, it's a question. What remains when the narrative imposed on you collapses? The exclamation point in the title, something Gyllenhaal has said is intentional, becomes a kind of emotional meter for the film. Moments are heightened, punctuated, almost violently emphatic. The Bride insists on existing in extremes: ecstasy and horror, love and domination, creation and destruction. The punctuation is visual and narrative, not just typographic. In a way, the film's central theme is that identity is less about origin and more about narrative ownership. Ida's struggle isn't just about survival. It's about rejecting the story that was handed to her and insisting on her own. That theme emerges not through exposition, but through repeated scenes in which she notices disparities between Frank's words and the world around her. Her awakening is incremental and uncertain. It doesn't happen in a single monologue, but in fleeting looks, in pauses, in small refusals. These choices are cinematic, not didactic. Interpretation is inevitable with a film like this, so I want to be clear about what is my reading and what is grounded in the text. The idea that Frank's act of imposing a narrative on Ida can be read as a metaphor for patriarchal storytelling choices is an interpretation supported by the way the film frames power dynamics on screen. Frank speaks for Ida long before she learns to speak for herself. The camera often remains aligned with his perspective. But as Ida's awareness grows, the camera's alignment shifts subtly toward her internal experience. That visual shift supports the argument that the film is asking us to reconsider who gets to tell a story. Upon release, The Bride divided audiences and critics. Some appreciated its ambition and emotional volatility, while others found its tonal shifts disorienting. Box office returns were modest, indicating that its boldness didn't translate to broad commercial success. But the conversations around the film about consent, creation, narrative authority, and identity suggest that it is a work that demands engagement rather than passive consumption. When the credits roll, you're left with more questions than answers, and that is precisely the point. This is not a tidy rehash of an old myth. It is a collision between a classic text and modern anxieties about who gets to shape someone's story. If you thought Frankenstein was just a story about a monster and his maker, The Bride invites you to think about whose voice gets heard and whose gets written over. Let the questions linger, let the images stay with you, and let the story continue to echo long after the screen goes dark. Until next time.